record.
Okay.
I was
Then
just
I will
actually
hit
finishing
play.
on my trivia because the wiki
Got
page,
my.
usually I was Ron Burgundying it and just looking at the wiki page. So if it's not on the wiki page, I don't think about it, right? And I was like, wait a minute, I
Yeah.
have to put in the trivia about this not being in circulation or
Yeah.
rebroadcast for like 50 years, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It's
And
crazy.
I felt like I read something about like it was the fact that Arthur or Tara or whatever, he admits that his dad
Hmm.
was like a traitor. And I feel like that was the one that really pissed people off somehow. I'm not sure. I feel like I read that,
There's
but
probably a lot of things that piss people off. But I imagine that would be right up there with it. And I also imagine that just the portrayal, well, I mean, we can get into it in the show, but just the portrayal of white American soldier as a coward and a bigot.
yeah,
Uh,
I guess now, geez, in
yeah,
2025, we have our, PTSD, all that. But yeah, I guess in
yeah.
64, and most of the people
Hmm.
making TV were in the war, right? So they might not
Hmm.
be into
Hmm.
that. But yeah, I guess we should roll on for that
Yep.
then. Let
I'm
me see.
recording on my end too.
Great.
So yeah.
Do you have the prologue anywhere within eyesight?
Ooh, I do not. I'm so
I
sorry.
can put
Can
no,
you
no,
put it
that's why I'm
there?
asking now. I can put that in the
Okay.
chat if need be.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah.
I just, at some point you're like, I should probably ask before the proper show starts.
There it is.
Okay. Give me just a 5-second pause so I can spot it, and I will start the
Sure.
show then. And I'm gonna turn up my own volume a bit. Your sound's fine. I think my own volume's a little down.
Got it. Okay.
Here we go. Welcome to Time Enough Podcast. It's where we delve into all of the episodes of The Twilight Zone and beyond, even the episodes that are rarely seen, like today's The Encounter. As always, this is Matt here, coming back from the Mission Log Podcast. It's John Champion. Howdy.
Hey, hey, good to be back as we count down to the very end
I
of season
think
five,
6 more
toward the end of the
episodes, yeah.
series. Oh, oh, so good, man.
It's nice to have a project that you wrap up. I mean, this podcast is not wrapping up. I have other things to do, but yeah, it is
Sure.
kind of like, well, because you wrap up a series every few years, and it's like, hey,
Yeah,
I'm
but
going to put a
but you
bow on
but you
that.
think you got to the finish line, and then oh, there's another one, and then they made another one, and then there's another one.
Same
Yeah,
with Twilight Zone. And also, you're
yeah.
like, should I go back and redo season one?
I'm,
Was I?
you know what? I've been talking about it, and I've been talking about it with Rod too.
Yeah, it's
So
like, because
you never
did I
know.
did I screw up the first time? I don't know. I guess
Yeah,
that's on the eye of the beholder to name another episode. But
right, right.
this is not when you specifically requested. I'm like, well, I gotta call you if we've got George Takei in here, with all the
Yeah,
Robert Butler directing. I'll do it all again in
yeah,
trivia, but I'm
yeah,
just like, this is so far like down proto Trek alley.
yeah. Totally, totally. And it's just an interesting slice of TV history. I remember I had only seen it for the first time maybe. Well, I guess when that original remastered DVD set came out, so probably like 15 years ago, something like that.
Yeah,
I
that's
had
what I'm rocking
no
here.
knowledge of this. Yeah,
This
yeah,
this was
no
my
knowledge
first
of this ever
episode, and as
existed.
soon as I watched it, I was like, "Crap, I need to watch it again." Which I don't always. I know you do that on
Yeah,
the Trek podcast, but I don't always do that, especially if time is there. But like, it was just
yeah,
like, "Oh, it's over. I need to watch this again." So like
yeah,
back to back viewings.
for real.
And
Yeah,
then I started doing like other like stuff on my computer, like the editing podcast, and then the commentary running for a third round because I was like, "Oh,
good.
Robert Butler and George Takei are here." So
It
for
has been
the
a long time since listened to that commentary, so I'm definitely going to rely on you to share some of those tasty nuggets with us. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get into that a little later on, but let's start with the trivia here. The original air date was May 1st, 1964. Martin Goldsmith wrote the script. He also penned the somewhat contentious What's in the Box, at least as far as this podcast go, it was very contentious. I mean, with like listener response and stuff too. Not to what we did, just they hated the episode.
Got it. Got it.
Sorry. As well as the book and film script for the classic noir Detour. And it kind of
Oh,
blew my mind that Martin Goldsmith wrote this because when I finished, I was like, that's got to be like one of Serling's best. I was like, oh, Serling didn't write this. Okay. Because it does have that DNA in it, which is probably why I
yeah.
like the script. But
Yeah. Yeah.
Robert Butler directed. He's been here before with Caesar and Me and had a half century career as a TV workman. Among his credits are a few episodes of Batman 66, and of course the franchise starter for Star Trek with the episode The Cage. And did you not have him on the Trek Files a few years ago? I mean, he's passed recently, but
I think we did. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we did.
I
Yeah,
feel
that
like I
sounds
listened to
right.
that.
That
Yeah,
would have
yeah.
been, I don't think we had him on the line or in studio. I think that's one of those interviews that Larry did. And then we kind of worked into a show later because he's good about that. He'll go find anybody and go right to their house and turn on a recorder, you know?
Yeah, it might have been a convention recording or something that was put into the
Yeah,
feed.
I
So,
think
but
that's
I
right.
definitely remember hearing from him talking about the cage and such.
Yeah.
Speaking of Trek, George Takei is here as author, Taro, author. See, I'm even more confused living in
Yeah.
Japan. I'm like, well, I should call him Taro, right? I don't know if he likes that.
Right.
Robert Butler did not direct George in the Cage, but of course we all know him from Star Trek. And if I remember correctly, you once got into a relatively scholarly argument with him about LA's public transit system.
You know what? I love George to death, and I have since then hosted some panels that he's on and chatted with him and Brad, and they are lovely people. But I will still maintain the position that, comparatively so, LA does not have a great public transportation system. I look at cities like London, Tokyo, New York, Washington D.C. I think we're lagging.
I've mastered Tokyo at this point. See, I live up in the mountains, so people are like, "Oh, you don't have much public transportation there." I'm like, "Well, I take the train to work and stuff. It works that
Yeah,
much, you
yeah,
know."
there you go. There
Because
you
I'm from
go.
Atlanta, which has MARTA, which is like MARTA is a cross. If you want to go anywhere in those pie slices, you are not using MARTA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another one. MARTA is great when it works. And if you're coming out of the airport and you need to go to the, one particular place, awesome. Anywhere else, no.
Yeah, there was a year, 2 years where I had an apartment near a MARTA station, and I actually took a few trips just because I'm like, oh, I can actually use this as a proper public transportation for once, so let me do that.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember
And
I
look,
went to
I get
the
it. San Francisco has an amazing public transportation, but you get to LA and it's just so spread out. And then people in LA for the last 100 years have been shooting themselves in the foot when it comes to any level of expansion. So again, sorry, George, you're a lovely human being, but on this we will have to disagree.
only one more actor to talk about here. Neville Brand was
Yeah.
here as Fenton. He's got a slew of TV and film credits and westerns, but at least half of his wiki page focuses on his military career. Very interestingly.
Wow.
Uh,
Wow.
he was a European front guy, not a Pacific front guy, and came away
Okay.
with 10 medals. And apparently, at some point, that it said this was erroneous, but he was like the fourth most decorated soldier in World War II, which I guess he wasn't the fourth, but it was probably up there. He
I mean, sure, yeah. Even if
apparently
you're in
getting
that top 4 percentile, I mean, that's yeah. Wow.
apparently getting shot by Germans does earn you a silver star. I thought that was a Purple Heart. Maybe you get both. He does have both or had both, but
Wow.
I don't know. I'm a pretty hardcore pacifist, so when I start looking at that many war medals, I look, and that does come through in the commentary. Like I don't like Neville Brand himself. Kind of was this guy. That's one thing I got from the commentary. Not that they had arguments or
Interesting.
anything, just like he was kind of like
Yeah.
on set a little bit disturbed.
Wow. Wow.
So he might be
So I mean,
method
the
acting.
bold. That's right away. You look at a script like this and a production like this, and you go, okay, it's people who are writing and producing it getting something off their chests, and then you look at a performance like that, and you go, wow, okay, you're probably dealing with some real stuff like that. That shows a bit of bravery, a bit of boldness to be able to bring that to life on the screen.
I think we saw that earlier this season with Mickey Rooney and Last Night of the Jockey. Now that's for much like, smaller, pun intended, reasons, but this is way deeper, and that leads to this episode not being rebroadcast in the US until 2016. I
Wow.
think we already mentioned the sensitive
Yeah.
issues explored here resulted in an intense bit of controversy for CBS from like multiple angles. I think this was on the
Yeah.
commentary where Dike mentions that the Japanese American Citizens Bureau or whatever, that's probably the wrong name, but they
Hmm.
were especially not happy that he admits his father was a traitor. Like, oh, he
Wow.
was he was a hero, he was getting people away. No, he was pointing to where they should go, and
Yeah.
that's one bit of controversy that so
It's so funny because I watched this thinking like, okay, it's been a while since I watched it. Exactly where did the controversy come from? You go like, okay, it could come from there. It could also come from there. It could also come from here. Pretty much equal opportunity. If you're in a mind to be offended at that time, then you could probably find something that does not rest well with you.
And it seems it did come from all directions for this one.
Yeah.
CBS just was like, let us wash our hands of this episode. Which is too bad because
Yeah.
well, the spoiler, I was like, holy crap, watching this episode is very
Yeah.
good. Um,
Yeah.
Before we get a little deeper into it, could you go ahead and give us that opening narration?
I'd be delighted. Two men alone in an attic. A young Japanese American and a seasoned veteran of yesterday's war. It's 20 odd years since Pearl Harbor, but two ancient opponents are moving into position for a battle in an attic crammed with skeletons, souvenirs, mementos, old uniforms, and rusted medals. Ghosts from the dim reaches, I'll take that again, ghosts from the dim reaches of the past that will lead us into the Twilight Zone.
Radio. Yeah, I feel like one interesting thing from my personal perspective, having not been in a war, being in the opposite position of living in Japan for a very long time,
Sure.
it's such a weird dissonance with this episode, just with my life experiences, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Um,
I mean, you and I both have, grown up in a world where Japan is an ally, and there is a lot of cultural respect and exchange, and it's definitely a necessary exercise to put yourself in the position of somebody living in the early 60s, where Pearl Harbor is not a distant memory. I mean, when this episode came out, they were it was less time since Pearl Harbor than we're living now compared to 9/11.
yeah. Oh, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's about right. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's becoming so distant. I mean, I teach
Yeah.
kids. I mean, they don't, and teach kids in Japan. They don't think about that stuff, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Of course. Of course.
Um, I guess what I did really get just like on the lighter end of things is George Takei always kind of complains like I never have enough to do in Star Trek, and I was like, oh, we all love Sulu. Come on, that was great. But yeah, watching this, you're like, they kind of didn't use him to his full potential. This is just like so on fire. I mean, in this episode, when you have two actors, they need to be on fire.
Yeah, and I mean, from word go, he is so strong. He's so riveting. Um, and I love how on a lot of old shows like this, and where you're really kind of ramping up the tension in the room, they both get sweatier, and you can just feel it because the door is locked and the windows are closed, and it's intense, it's cramped. There's all this stuff in there. But George, from the time he walks in, he's so young and charming, and then almost immediately it just goes to this dark place, and you can feel it as the audience, particularly as an audience now, but hopefully an audience then as well. You're tipping him off by immediately with Fenton calling Arthur boy, and kind of remarking on his status or background and questioning how American he is. And you just see this tension, you see this stuff bubble up that George is playing without having to say much at all. It's just right there on his face.
No, I was sitting there writing notes, and oh, they are going to focus on this because I'm like in 1964, can you just be boy and it's okay? It doesn't sound good now, and I guess it didn't sound good then either. So, um,
Yeah, exactly.
one
Yeah.
one disconnect, just family wise, because uh in watching this, and the people, my grandfathers were not in the Pacific. My
Hmm.
maternal grandmother, he actually he was drafted, but I think he just served in Florida, like he didn't get sent
Okay.
abroad or anything.
Yeah.
My paternal grandfather was a doctor, and he mashed all the way from Tangier to Berlin, and went on
Wow.
to never
Wow.
talk about it again. But again, that's European
Yeah.
front.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
my parents'
Yeah.
house, that was the thing. Here they got the sword, right?
Yeah.
And in my house, we still have like a Nazi dagger, that like officer dagger that he took off of a body, in Africa
Right.
in 1940, whatever. So I'm like,
Right.
well, we have a
Right.
similar relic. It says Alles for Deutschland on it. It's creepy stuff.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, my grandfather similarly. He spent time in Europe, and he was with Patton's Fourth Armored, and Never talked about it, but he kept a trunk full of stuff, which my uncle then inherited a good deal of that. And the one time that I saw him really kind of engage with it is that there was a reunion of the Fourth Armored Division, and this was probably sometime in the '90s, and it was toward the end of my grandfather's life. But all these guys were there, and they all had this connection to each other, and you saw him kind of light up a bit. Again, didn't talk directly to us about much of this, um, but it was a weird feeling to walk around in this room and just go like, okay, this had to have an incredibly profound, life-altering effect on you. But by the way, you're the guys who saved the world. Okay, just just want to make that clear, right?
Yeah, but when your boots on the ground and just doing and living through horrible situations, the next
Yeah,
day you just can't, did I just save the world? Or it doesn't feel
yeah,
like it, you know?
yeah,
Which
sure.
is, key to this episode kind of working because
Mm-hmm.
this guy is broken. They just toss off that he's lost his job recently. His wife has just left him. He's a long-term alcoholic. Like he's hitting bottom in an attic, you know?
I took notes on that too. I was really interested to see that they do not shy away from connecting his alcoholism to his problem. And he early in the episode he says something about like, "Oh, my wife and I we had this spat," and then it's like, "No, no, no, she left me." And he keeps hitting the beer. By the way, love those vintage beer cans. Not vintage at the time, but vintage now.
No, no, no.
um,
Gives you Shawshank flashbacks as they're on the roof drinking.
yeah. But yeah, they do not shy away from the things that are haunting Fenton.
And one of the reasons I think I finished and was like, oh man, that was a great Serling script. No, it's not. Is this is one of the grayest areas for the actual Twilight Zone, which I'll get into in the
Mm.
questions more. But I mean, the door seems to be supernaturally like jammed closed for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I wondered about that because it was it was a little too on the nose. There is something that I like about it. If you remove that element from it, there's something that I like about it where you can almost take out the supernatural element. Because I wrote down early, like, okay, does the sword have some kind of inherent power? What's going on here? And you could almost look at this as a drama between two people who are haunted, quote unquote, not in a literal way, not in a spiritual way, but by the guilt, by the shame, by all the experiences they've been through. And they're just sort of doomed to play this thing out with each other. But when you introduce the sword, and then you also have the door seal itself shut. It's like, okay, now we're indicating to the audience that there is an actual supernatural force at play here. I don't think you need it. I feel like it was almost a bit of padding just to keep justifying that these two people are in the same room.
Yeah, because yeah, like, sort of possessing him a little bit. Like that doesn't need to be the
Mm.
case at all. But he
Yeah,
does say, "I'm
yeah.
going to kill him." I think before the opening narration
Yeah,
starts. I mean,
exactly.
we
Exactly.
we
You
we
got
know what's
tipping their
going to
hand.
happen. Yeah, we know what's going to
Yeah,
happen straight away. And the
yeah,
episode does make you think, "Oh, can these guys work it out as it's going?" You know, but
yeah,
of course they do not. So.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I'm sitting here like I've been to Okinawa. It was all fun and games for me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, not for Fenton. Yeah.
Although the Southern Islands, I think they are just because of, geopolitics and China and things. I think they are starting to just build it up a little bit military wise down there again. So like
Mm.
the Japanese, the Americans have been there. That's been a point of contention that there are still American bases in Okinawa. And I remember when I went in 2018, um, I wanted to go snorkeling to a place and I couldn't because it was a U.S. Air Force base. It's off limits. It's a
Oh,
fence.
wow. Wow.
Like,
Jeez.
hey, my own
Yeah.
countries keep me from the good snorkel spot. I don't like that. I like to snorkel. Um, I was happy when he says, "Do you know what cat means?" Because shake hands with danger is like non-ironically in my top 10 of all time. So I'm like, I know
Yes.
what cat is. I can play the song. I've recorded a cover of the song.
You sure did. That's right. And I love it that because when he first said that line, and it kind of threw me for a second, like, wait, what does he mean? And then he says literally earth movers. I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, literally caterpillar. Like you are literally driving those things. That is great. Bravo for the product placement. you know, nice
It's
bit.
years for that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing I was thinking of, I don't know if you're ever an X-Men fan or whatever, but there was a thing in the late 80s in the comic book where one of the long shots, one of his mutant powers turns out to be like to get memories from items. I mean, I think that's a psychic thing too. Like when you touch the sword is imbuing things into you. And I did that. That
Yeah.
was coloring my viewing of this episode because if we are going to assume something supernatural weird is happening, it would be along those
Right,
lines.
right. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. There's that, I think I've mentioned on a mission log before, there's kind of that like psychological exercise. And if you go to a thrift store and you buy a sweater, like that has no meaning. Like, okay, you bring it home, you wash it, you wear it, it's your sweater you got from a thrift store. But if you found out that sweater was owned by Hitler, okay, it nothing has changed. But now you walk around with that sort of psychic energy you're associating with it. And that's where I thought it was more interesting, the idea that the sword has a certain meaning to Fenton, and it has this guilt that he walks around because he killed a Japanese soldier in cold blood. But it also has a meaning to Arthur because of what he's gone through. um, that you don't necessarily have to have that supernatural thing attached to it. That people walk around and they are projecting on that object whatever they're bringing to the table. It is the Twilight Zone, so we have to have a bit of that supernatural. Like, no, fate is like a literal force that is making them act out. But again, you almost don't have to have that.
Yeah, I'm thinking, what is the equivalent in Japan? I've seen far less of them. It might just be like where I travel, but I remember when I first came 20 years ago, you'd go into, in front of train stations or in public spaces and have a big
Hmm.
black um uh van of like the Japanese far right, like like
Hmm.
still existing, basically just being like, Japan should be Japan, Japan for Japanese, all that, and I feel like that has tailed off in the past 20 years. Here it's hard to say if this kind of thing's trailing off, but
Right.
unfortunately, but
Yeah. Yeah.
let's see. I'm just bopping through my notes here and seeing what else.
Sure. Yeah. I
I
mean,
don't know.
I got a note for you. Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about Arthur's demeanor from the very beginning. And I also like at the very beginning that they set up a little bit where Arthur gets to talk back. And it's where you come back from the opening credits. So we did the setup. You go to the credits, you come back, Fenton is still hammering away at him, and you actually give Arthur a little bit of backbone. And he says, like, I don't care to be called boy and call me by my name and blah blah blah. So you see that, but then it is immediately followed by Arthur apologizing. And I thought that was that was just like a stab right in the heart that he's being bullied and he does the right thing, which is to stand up. But then I guess out of fear, out of the power imbalance, he apologizes for being out of line, you
And then
know?
he gets
Yeah.
micro insult again right after that because
Yeah.
he's like, let's drink. He's like, bonsai, which that's not what you say when you have a drink. You say
Yeah.
kampai.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Fenton might not know this, but it also is like, is that like a microaggression he's putting out there? Because uh,
Well, yeah, I think so. But there's a lot of micro and macro aggressions coming from Fenton. There was another thing that really struck me about this, and that's that, okay, you have the obvious bigotry, racism, that is very much on the surface and it is very apparent. But I want to go back to this thing you mentioned about Fenton talking about driving cats, driving, caterpillar earth movers. I think you can also really look at this episode through a lens as a play about masculinity. That line of Fenton's talking about, you know what I do? I move the earth. You know what you do? You manicure it. And that was such a it was such a way to diminish Arthur and what he does. And by the way, also stereotypically a very Japanese thing. Japanese gardens are beautiful. They take a lot of attention, a lot of tending. And it is that kind of precise care and appreciation for aesthetic that is very different from what you think about a guy like Fenton out there just ripping up pieces of the earth for what, to create a mine or, you know, level out a piece of land to build a shopping mall on. It's a very different thing. But it plays into this really aggressive kind of masculinity where he is constantly trying to show him up like, look how much bigger, tougher, more of a man I am than you are.
Getting back to Shake Hands with Danger. I mean,
Yeah.
I've always joked like when they show the guy that's about to drive his cat off of a cliff or whatever, like he's had a bad day. He's worried about his son's football related knee injury. It's got to be his son's
Of
football related
course.
knee injury. It can't be
Of
anything else in his life. It's
course.
got to be
No.
something real
No.
manly he's working, worried about in that one.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
same thing here. Yeah, as you're getting at. Um, I guess I'll just put out now that whatever I give the tripometer as we're rolling through the questions will be
Yeah.
point 0.5 points will be deducted. I
Oh,
mean, I got
okay.
the number. Yeah, we've
Yeah.
had this is the first full-on Twilight Zone window we've got in season 5, I think, and it's pretty stupid. Like
Yeah.
that was like I get like there's like these guys have destroyed each other, but come on, out the window.
Yeah.
That's a cliche in the Twilight Zone. It did not
It's the
ruin the
one
episode for me, but
it's the one thing. Yeah, I think it hurts the episode. I don't look, I'm not a TV writer. Of course, we wear the writer's hat every now and then on Mission Log. Uh, but I don't think that's the way you end this one. I don't think you should. It takes away something from our understanding of who Arthur is, and again, it tips it into this supernatural world instead of just these people grappling with what they're bringing to the table. It's too bad. I
I'm
don't love that moment.
I'm also thinking about like just what people had in minds. Like you said, this is closer to Pearl Harbor than we are to 9/11 now. So they
Hmm.
still have it on the mind. You and I are way younger we weren't around when that happened. So I was
Yeah,
thinking like what
yeah.
is our actual images of World War II? Like D-Day.
Hmm.
What is your mental image for that?
Yeah, I mean, very easily. I because I studied much more the European campaign than I have the Pacific, and I can very easily picture all that documentary footage of the building of the mulberries and those amphibious vehicles landing, and knowing from my grandfather's maps and having been to many of these places, both the American beaches and the Commonwealth beaches. I know so specifically what that looks like in my head. And I've heard hundreds and hundreds of stories about it. I know less about the Pacific, not that I'm totally ignorant of what happened there. Um, I've been to Pearl Harbor. Didn't spend a whole lot of time there, but I can easily picture that in my head too. And unfortunately, I think a lot of what I see in my head for at least that moment is stuff from narrative film, not necessarily from documentary.
That's what I'm getting
You
at. Like
know?
if I think of
Yeah.
D-Day, I'm either getting images of Saving Private Ryan or having played what is it, Medal of Honor, the one that Spielberg produced, and
Oh,
then Call of Duty knocked,
interesting. Yeah.
just like slapped them out of the park. But there was that original game, which apparently there was a Spielberg connection that had you going through D-Day, and I'm like, well, that's the closest thing that I have in my memory playing this video game, right?
Oh,
Which is
interesting. Yeah,
very
because
different for the guys in this room.
yeah, no,
I
I mean,
saw the
I think,
Pacific. That's what I think of when I'm here to look around the Pacific. Good show, but I'm like, is that
yeah,
accurate?
yeah. No, I mean, I think with D-Day, I think I tend to think through history and documentary also supplemented with a lot of great narrative works. I mean, most recently watching Masters of the Air about the 100th Airborne Division, launching out of England and constantly doing these sorties over the continent. But when I think about the Pacific, Tora 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 is,
Yeah.
that's probably the first thing that comes to mind. Yeah.
No, it's just I'm just thinking here as people in 2025, like what we're seeing is not the reality of the situation at all, even if it felt real when we saw it in that movie, which is
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
there is a certain level where we cannot understand that the experience of Taro being a boy at Pearl Harbor and of
Yeah.
Fenton's experiences, which it is easy to criticize and even not what's the strong word for that? Damn Mr. Fenton, he's a
Yeah.
bigoted prick basically, but
Yeah. Yeah,
But he had
yeah.
experiences that I cannot understand, you know?
Sure. And that's always interesting to me is, when you get to the end of the hostilities like that. So a guy like Fenton, who, um, in this time frame, he's probably like, like in his mid 40s or something, we assume, so he's not young, but he's also not old. Um, he he is required to put away these hard feelings and this horror that he has been through in the Pacific in order to be a civilized human being, in order to move along with his life. But he has also seen and done the worst of it. So when faced with somebody who brings back all of that, because in walks Arthur, who is the age now of the soldiers that Fenton was fighting against 20 years before. How can that not bring back all the guilt, all the shame, all the horror, everything that he has walked around with every single day since the end? And you can tell somebody it's over. You can tell somebody don't be a violent, fighter every time you come across somebody. You have to start treating people like human beings again. But he goes through that whole monologue talking about being trained to treat Japanese as less than human. It's really disturbing, but it also allows you this glimpse into his state of mind.
Yeah, I asked because I was curious at one point, like, hey, is
Hmm.
there a family katana around the house? Which the answer is no. But I have found in the family house just these fascinating, like in the family album. Sorry, I don't know if you can see these, and the listener certainly can't. But it's just
Oh
we
yeah,
have a
it's kind of blown
kid,
out.
we have a
Uh,
kid on a battleship. We've
oh
got
wow.
a tent made of guns. I have all these like World War II like family photos in the family album, and they're
Wow.
all.
Wow.
I'll send those your
Yeah.
way actually, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's just
yeah.
it's kind of fascinating and just to find it because a lot of the pictures are in the house I found them in, you know?
Oh yeah.
Like you
Yeah,
see the
yeah.
front of the house, oh, that's right where I'm in now, right? It's so just yeah,
Wow.
that
Wow.
connect is very interesting.
Very cool.
Let's do a few questions. Oh, wait. The one
Yeah.
note I just had to write down the quote. I've got a short fuse, so don't strike matches, which was fantastic. So
That's a great line.
yeah. That's where I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
want this to be a Serling, and it's not. So more props to Mr. Goldsmith, who we didn't
Yeah.
not seem to like what's in the box, but this one does it. Well,
Yeah.
here's an interesting thing. This episode is as uncomfortable as what's in the box, but that one felt misogynistic, and this one feels much deeper somehow.
Yeah. 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 Well, I think partly because, okay, you start out with Fenton's bigotry, but you also kind of peel back the layers and you try to sympathize a little bit with, or empathize rather, about how he got there. And then I think there's another really disturbing layer, which may also indicate why this one was pulled out of circulation for so long, is that this script really, it clearly points the finger at the system for being partly responsible for Fenton's problems. It's not just it's not just that he's a guy who can't control his anger and his violent outbursts, and he's an alcoholic. It's like, no, no, we're absolutely describing to you how war dehumanized him and how being in the army made him a wreck. And that is a very uncomfortable thing to hear, certainly for an audience then, and even for an audience now. If you have any sense of, look, quote unquote, our side and our version of the story of that war, we like to think of heroes. Well, in the intervening years, of course, we had a lot of movies, a lot of books, and a lot of TV shows celebrated the heroism of those people. But we have also more recently had a lot of stories about how these people were, chewed up and spit out of a dehumanizing machine. And that's what happened to Fenton. Um,
And that's kind of what
which only,
happened to Author. He got stunted. He's been going around for 20, or 15, 20 years telling people my father is a hero, knowing full well that he was, you know, Well, to some people, he might be a hero, but not not to the
Yeah,
American
well,
forces.
and you know that's what's so clever about the script is putting them on equal footing in that place. Is that they both have a secret, they both have this guilt, they both have this thing that is absolutely tearing them up from the inside.
Well, let's get into our questions then and ask who
Yeah.
in this episode goes in or through the Twilight Zone. You only have two choices.
Yeah, I mean, I got to go with Arthur because I don't think you need to invoke a Twilight Zone to get Fenton to the place where he is. I think if he ever went through the Twilight Zone, it was having his humanity crushed out of him by his experience in the war. And he's just been coasting for the last 20 years, trying not to have a blow up. And he's been treating himself with alcohol and obviously being terrible to his wife. So he's just living that experience that he has had. Arthur, yeah, he's been walking around with guilt, but the day he stepped into that attic and when the door shut behind him and he picked up that sword, he is full on express train into the Twilight Zone. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, Express Train into a Twilight Zone. I like that. I am
Yeah.
sitting here thinking, like, I was like, well, it's both of them. Fenton being somewhat broken, and something interesting. I
Mm-hmm.
was just, I was looking at the opening narration again, and I probably should have a little squiz to go Australian on you at the closing narration too, because
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Rob, uh, Rod is not damning this guy, and his
Yeah.
opening or closing, which sometimes it's very on the nose. Like this guy sucks. Wait for
Yeah.
something horrible to happen to him. I'm just checking the closing and seeing if he does anything there. No, it's just two men in an attic. Their
Yeah.
common enemy, guilt, an enemy for both of them, a
Yeah.
disease all too prevalent. So it maybe because of Rod's experience as someone in the Pacific, he's and I know he didn't write the script. Does he write the opening and closing all the time? I don't know, but it's just
I thought he
interesting
did.
that he does
Yeah.
not damn Fenton in the opening or closing narration.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I think the script does an adequate job of damning Fenton. But again, it's done in this way that I think it's so clear that he is a broken human. It is so clear that he has all these terrible traits. And yet there's this little bit that makes it go, well, he didn't just wake up one day and decide to be that. He had to have his humanity beaten out of him at some point and he has just been living the consequence of that for 20 years.
I mean, I guess, even with all the war experience, because we assumed he's drafted, had to go, but the
Yeah.
moment he kills someone that he didn't need to kill, that's
Yeah.
that's when he's broken, basically. Whereas
Yeah. Yeah.
Arthur's not there yet. So I guess we should ask if Arthur deserves his trip out the Twilight Zone window.
Oh man, see, I feel like Arthur deserves to come face to face with the repressed guilt, the story of his father. And I love that I wrote down, plot twist. Arthur's father built the docks at Pearl Harbor. Plot twist. He was a traitor. Plot twist again. He was a traitor. This is a great moments of building these layers. Um, but if the implication by the end of it is that Arthur has somehow gone mad, like he has somehow lost his personality because of the power of the sword, and that compels him to go out the window, does he deserve it? I don't really think so. It just looks like this new life of madness at that point. That doesn't sit right either.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like how you can't have it could be the best bit of sketch comedy, but if you end it with like dun 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 dun, you just ruin the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, there's something about just the idea of him uh, accepting the moment of what happened because the way they play that choreography, I went back and paused and kind of slow-mo forwarded to watch the choreography of okay, they have the sword, Fenton turns around. It kind of seems like Arthur is trying to pull him away from the sword, but somehow he doesn't. Like that. It's very murky that blocking with the two of them, and it makes you wonder, okay, was Arthur trying to impale him or is he trying to pull him away? But regardless, dude gets impaled.
I do like that in the episode. I like how it's not clear how much you're being affected by an outside force, how much is pure bigotry. Did he
Yeah,
intentionally
yeah,
kill him? Was it kind of an accident? I mean, he was in a threatening position at least, so
yeah. But at that point, then okay, what does it do to Arthur? And I kind of I want another moment of realization or something with Arthur instead of just, oh, okay, he's too far gone now. Now he's going to jump out of the window.
yeah, so we're at 24 minutes and 45 seconds. We need to end this.
Yeah,
That sort of
right.
thing.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I don't think this would work as a 45-minute episode, which sometimes comes up.
No,
Should it be as
no,
no,
no.
no, this one is pretty
Yeah,
if it is wrongly length, like it need to be 1 minute longer.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let's place this one onto the tripometer. Zero is not trippy at all. Five is very trippy.
Yeah, it's trippy in a not fun way. Like sometimes trippy is like, oh, cool, we're going to outer space and, confronting, the origin of humanity and like big ideas like that. This is very trippy in that it is, um, well, it's doing what Twilight Zone does very well, which is, fate coming back to bite you in the ass, and that's very dark. And there is this weird sort of karmic justice being served out here. So it's trippy as hell. These two people go mad because they spent 20 minutes together in an attic.
Yeah, for me, score wise, I guess I'm gonna go four because I'm like
Okay.
maybe for what you said, the fact that it's not fun trippy, I don't want to go like all the way with it. And then I did write in my notes automatic point 0.5 off for the Twilight Zone window, so that
Yeah,
leaves it
that
a four.
that's yeah, yeah. Okay, then I'll go 4.5. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. You can.
Yeah.
I don't know which one you're cutting, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you want to throw off on the encounter?
Man, it's a remarkable episode. It really is. And anybody who hasn't seen it because it was frankly hard to get for a while, they owe it to themselves to watch it again. George Takei is just fantastic. It's so nice to watch him in this kind of thing, other than just what you've seen him do for 60 years, which is be Sulu. Um, but I love the message of this. I like a show being this bold in the early 60s, doing something about an unglamorous, an unheroic war story. You can tell why this got caught. And that ending, yeah, I mean, it I have a problem with that. but it's just one moment. It doesn't ruin the episode. It's just a moment that you kind of go like, okay, I wish they'd done something else. But that's
I
okay. That's okay.
maybe this is where the famous rivalry starts with Shatner. Because I'm thinking of the Star Trek guys that show up in the Twilight Zone. Jimmy Doohan, it's like
Yeah.
blink and you'll miss him. I mean, it's not
Yeah,
bad,
yeah.
just blink and you'll miss him.
Sure.
Leonard Nimoy, when he shows up, blink even more and you'll miss him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Shatner, of
yeah.
course, did a couple iconic ones, but they're not so divorced from his regular kind of shtick. Whereas this is just
Yeah.
like different than what
Yeah.
you're used to
And
seeing
and
from.
really does perform like a play. This episode really, more than a lot of them, just feels like a play in the best possible sense.
That does seem to be the season five thing. New producer. I
Right.
guess we're trying to save a little money, so a lot of these
Yeah,
do feel black
maybe.
boxy to the point where sometimes they're just painting things on a black wall and making it kind of it's stylized, right? So this
Yeah.
one did have
Yeah,
the
yeah.
tricked out. Uh, Attic was definitely like production designed. 60s man caves are crap here, I guess. So I don't want to hang out in here.
Yeah. And yeah, it's not a great place. I think I also kind of wrestled with this idea of, does Fenton deserve what happened to him? Because it feels like his whole life for 20 years has been building up to this. Like, how is he going to pay karmically for what he did when he was a soldier? And then I also wondered, like, even though he lives, does Arthur actually deserve what he got? Because if what he gets now is a future of madness and a future of being, hunted down as a fugitive who killed somebody with a samurai sword, that's not fair either. You know, um, he he was pushed to the edge and he lost it. He needs therapy.
Yes, not a
Yeah.
big thing in the 60s.
No, no, no.
No, one interesting thing, I until I watched the episode, probably a few weeks ago, I realized this looking at plot descriptions, but I always assumed the encounter was on like one of those like Alaskan islands or something, which where they find
Uh,
the old, which actually doesn't make sense for that to be George Takei because he's very young in this episode. But I always thought that was
right,
what this episode was going to be, and it was not at all. So. Uh,
right, right, right.
I guess I'm just fascinated by that situation where 20 years later you still think the war is going on.
Yeah,
Although
yeah,
I guess it
yeah,
is here in a certain way. Um,
yeah.
let's wind this down. It is the end of April. We are crawling into May. What's up in Mission Log?
Oh man, we are. Oh, hold that thought. Sorry. Um, sorry. Here's your edit point. We are coming up right to the end of season 6 of Voyager. So we will end that in May. We'll have a couple of supplemental episodes. We have at least one interview coming up with a Voyager insider. And then we will also have an episode that is a special guest talking to me and Norman about kind of looking back on the first 6 seasons of Voyager and just taking that little break before we buckle down for season 7. It's one of those, I always feel this way when we get to the end of a series. Like, I'm looking forward to doing the next thing, but I also don't want it to end. And these, even though they take years to get through, it always feels too fast. Getting to the end of TOS was too fast. Getting to the end of Next Gen was too fast. Um, so here we are again. Yeah,
Time flies, yeah.
it does. It does.
Of course, it's time enough podcast to leave us a groovy rating and review. We're also over at Podcastio, podcastius.org, and on Patreon, where we do a lot of podcasting, films and filth. We look at what are supposed to be really good films and really bad films according to IMDb. Podcast 1999, where we did Space 1999. Now we're doing Planet of the Apes, and there's stuff like
Yeah.
Luke Loves Pokemon and the Game Show. Encounter those people.
Nice.
Okay, I'll put my cut there after, you say something ridiculous, you have to put your cut there.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely.
But,
Sorry, by the way, about the edits and interruptions. My phone never, ever, ever rings. Ever. And it rang twice during this. And I because I don't use this phone, I kept trying to find the mute switch on it. But
no, I was doing a
anyway.
podcast. Actually, I think the one I was doing with BC, I was getting like just my old high school band, like rock band, was just like suddenly having like this flurry of messages, and
Yeah.
I'm curious if I get audibly distracted in that episode or not because it's just bing, like it was making a noise too. I'm like,
Right, right,
it
right.
was kind of driving me a little nutty. I
Okay.
think the next movie we have you up for is Casablanca. Oh no, no, well, it's going to be a little while, but eventually. Cinema Paradiso is just
Oh,
maybe
yes.
3, 4 months before we get there.
Okay.
Um,
Cool.
doing The Room soon.
Oh my God. I want to watch what's the what was the narrative they did about the making of The Room? I can't remember.
The Disaster Artist.
Is that yes, 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 yes. A friend of mine loaned me the book. I really want to see the movie. It's just weird, man. It's
Yeah,
terrible.
it is like there's so many movies. Like I still haven't seen Phantom Thread, but midnight last night. Oh, I'm gonna put on this dumb submarine movie.
There we go. There
So
we
it's
go.
like I
Indeed.
should watch Phantom Thread. I still haven't seen it, and I love PTA, but whatever.
Uh, well, and I keep building my digital film library because, like, okay, when I did Andy's podcast and we talked about Yankee Doodle Dandy, right? So very interesting. I had not seen that movie since I was about 15, but I don't own it on DVD or Blu-ray, so I went to Apple TV to look it up and I was like, okay, $9, I'll buy it. But for $19, they include like 4 other movies. So now I keep building this library of things that I should be watching, mostly classics, but I gotta watch more Twilight Zone
Yeah.
because I can't stop. And Severance, I'm now entering season 2.
Oh,
So
okay. It's on as
yeah.
Mark keeps telling me to watch it. It's on my computer. Haven't gotten around to it yet.
Okay.
It's
All
there. It's
right.
ready to go. That and Andor are in ready to go. Just haven't seen them. No, the only
Oh,
movie
dude, yeah, because Andor
coming.
comes out
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to be cut off
And
by then.
yeah, but a friend of mine just texted me to say that there is a 14-minute season 1 recap. So I'm gonna watch that before I get into season two. I don't have time to watch the whole series again. But
I don't rent movies often, and I remember because I had to rent a movie recently, and I was like, the last movie I personally rented was like Down with Love in 2004. I remember that,
oh my God, yeah, I
but I
remember it.
had to watch Police Academy 7. I had to rent it. But then after we had so much fun talking about the movie and stuff, I was like,
Of course.
then this happened. Now I got all of
There you go. Now you got the set. Of course. Of course.
them. I rented it. It was like $3 for the rental, and the set wasn't. It was like $20. It wasn't that bad.
Oh God, that's awesome.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and hit my record.